All right, welcome. If you're gearing up for your GCSE chemistry exams, you are in exactly the right place. We are diving straight into AQA Section 4.10.2, which is all about life cycle assessments and recycling. Let's break down everything you need to know to absolutely nail those exam questions.
So let's kick things off with a question you've probably asked yourself a bunch of times. You're at the supermarket, you've forgotten your reusable bag, we've all been there, and you're faced with that classic dilemma: plastic or paper. It feels like it should be an easy choice, right? But the real answer is way more complex than you'd think, and understanding why it's so complex is the key to this whole topic. Here's our game plan. We'll start with why we even have this resource dilemma. Then we'll get into what a life cycle assessment, or LCA, actually is. We'll apply it to our plastic versus paper debate, look at the whole reduce, reuse, recycle idea, and then finish up with the key things you need to remember for your exam.
Okay, let's get into our first section, our resource dilemma. You might be wondering, why is this topic even on the chemistry specification? It's a really good question.
Well, it all comes down to one crucial fact. We live on a planet with a limited or finite supply of resources. Things like crude oil, metal ores, they're not going to last forever. Every single thing we make, whether it's a phone or just a simple bag, comes from these resources. And that's why we have to think about sustainable development. Making sure we have what we need today without messing things up for future generations.
So how do scientists and companies figure out the real environmental cost of a product? That brings us to the most important concept you need to get your head around for this topic: the life cycle assessment, or LCA for short.
An LCA is basically a method for looking at the environmental impact of something across its entire life. And that word entire is so important. It's not just about what happens when you throw it in the bin. No, it's a complete cradle-to-grave analysis of everything.
So for your exam, you need to know these 4 key stages. Stage 1 is getting the raw materials. Think drilling for oil or chopping down trees. Stage 2 is the manufacturing and packaging, all the energy and water used to turn those raw materials into the final product. Stage 3 is the product's actual life, how it's used. And finally, Stage 4 is disposal, what happens at the very end. And don't forget, you have to factor in the transport between every single one of those stages too. Now listen up, because this is a massive hint for getting those top marks in an exam. This quote comes directly from your AQA specification. See, it's easy to put a number on how much water is used, but how do you put a number on the damage a pollutant does to a river? It's really hard, and it involves opinions, or what the spec calls value judgments. This means that an LCA, while it's a great tool, is never a purely objective, black and white process. Remember that. Okay, theory time is over. Let's actually apply these 4 stages to our big question: plastic versus paper. This is exactly the kind of simple comparison you might be asked to think about in your exam.
Right, Stage 1, raw materials, plastic bags, they come from crude oil, which is a finite resource. Paper bags, they're from timber, and since we can plant more trees, that's a renewable resource. So, in round 1, it looks like paper has the clear advantage. But now we get to Stage 2, manufacturing. And this is where it gets interesting. The process of turning wood into pulp and then into a paper bag actually uses a ton of energy and water, often way more than making a plastic bag. So, surprisingly, plastic might actually be the winner at this stage. See? Not so simple.
Next up, Stage 3, how we use them. Let's be honest, plastic bags are usually stronger. They can handle a bit of rain, and you can reuse them more often, maybe as a bin liner or to carry your shopping again. Paper bags, they tear much more easily, so that's another point for plastic.
And finally, we're at the end of the road: disposal. Now, both bags can be recycled, but if they end up in landfill, a paper bag will break down and biodegrade pretty quickly. A plastic bag, on the other hand, can stick around for hundreds of years, causing all sorts of pollution. So, at the final hurdle, it's a clear win for paper.
So, what's the verdict? Well, this shows perfectly that there is no simple winner. The better bag really depends on what you care about most. Is it saving finite resources, or using less energy, or maybe reducing landfill waste? An LCA doesn't give you a single right answer. It just gives you all the data so you can make an informed choice.
This whole complicated picture leads us pretty neatly to a much better strategy for lowering our impact on the planet, and it's one you've definitely heard of before.
The 3 R's. It's really important to think of them as a hierarchy, in this specific order.
The best, most powerful thing you can do is reduce. Just use less stuff in the first place. This is why the real winner of the bag debate is a reusable bag for life, because you reduce the need for new bags altogether. The next best thing is to reuse items as many times as you can. And then the last resort is to recycle the material into something new.
So, how does recycling actually work? Well, for metals, it's pretty straightforward. They can be melted down and reformed into new products. With glass, the bottles are usually crushed up and then melted to make new glass. The key benefits you need to remember for your exam are that recycling means we don't have to mine as much for those limited raw materials, and it saves a huge amount of energy compared to making things from scratch.
Okay, we have covered a lot of ground. So let's pull it all together and focus on the absolute must-know points that you need to take away for your exam.
First up, make sure you can define what a life cycle assessment is. Second, you have to know those 4 stages: raw materials, manufacturing, use, and disposal. Third, be ready to apply those stages in a simple comparison, just like we did with the bags. Fourth, and this is for the top marks, remember that LCAs are not purely objective, they involve value judgments. Fifth, explain the benefits of the 3 Rs, and remember they are a hierarchy. And finally, be able to give an example of how materials like metal or glass are recycled. Got it?
So you can now look at a simple shopping bag and analyze its entire life. But that leaves us with one last thought. What about something way more complex, like the phone in your pocket? Think about it. The rare metals that have to be mined all over the world, the energy to build it, the electricity it uses every day, and where it ends up. The principles are exactly the same, just on a much, much bigger scale. Good luck with your revision.